This is Compass, Finding Spirituality in the Everyday. My name is Reverend Ryan Dunn, and I really wonder if, at times, I really want to have the spiritual actually interfere with my everyday, if I'm just being honest. I mean, I'd like to see the divine in action on the daily, but the divine can be a bit disruptive to the normative order of things. So actually having divine experiences myself every day might get a little bit uncomfortable. But 'tis the new year, 'tis the season for trying new things, adopting new habits, and getting a bit uncomfortable. So in this abridged New Year's edition of Compass, we're going to address the utility of prayer and how prayer can actually kind of mess things up in our lives and disrupt our everyday experiences with holy moments, which might be a good thing. Let's get into it. There are a lot of things that we like to look at, which we don't necessarily long to experience ourselves. Like, do you ever watch surgery TV, or have you ever gawked at a car accident? My wife spends a couple evenings a week watching dermatology procedures on YouTube. And these are like videos of boils getting lanced and such. And she finds peace in that. But I doubt that she wants to actually be there, either getting lanced or doing the lancing herself. Now, how about Shark Week? Have you heard of Shark Week? It's a fascinating phenomenon, isn't it? The Discovery Channel has annually dedicated a week of programming to sharks for over 30 years. This has been going on. It's amazing that this has lasted so long. Our culture, it seems, has this strange fascination with sharks. They intrigue and inspire us. We long to witness more of them, right? 30 years we've been doing this week-long thing. We want to know more. We're curious. Even still, the vast majority of us would never intentionally get in the water with a shark, right? The fear that a shark might get a hold of us and really mess us up keeps us wary of shark-inhabited waters. Now, here's a jump. This is kind of the Jesus juke. Exodus 20 in the Bible. What's happening here is that the Hebrews are kind of doing their own Shark Week. Through the Exodus story, the previous 19 chapters of Exodus, the Hebrews have seen a lot of God in action. This is the time when the Hebrews are kept captive in Egypt, and they're calling for their freedom, and they're moving out into the freedom. So they've witnessed the plagues in Egypt, in which God and Moses are trying to convince the Pharaoh to let the Hebrews go. The Hebrews had experienced God's special care for them as they fled their pursuing Egyptian captors. God had delivered them to freedom from slavery, and by Exodus 20, they were convinced now that God definitely had some power. They wanted to see and know more about God, but here in Exodus 20, we see that there's no way that they are about to jump into the proverbial waters with that being God. God looked fascinating, but God could also really mess you up if God got a hold of you. Did you see what God did to Pharaoh? After all, God will mess you up. So when they saw a cloud descend to earth before them, and they had discerned that in this cloud was surely the presence of the divine, they decided that they were going to keep a safe, observable distance. Instead of going to meet God, they sent Moses, saying, Moses, you go, we'll watch from back here. Now, in our current conditions, it's been a long time since we witnessed the divine as a cloud with smoke, thunder, and lightning. Today, we kind of, address God in friendlier terms. Sometimes we call God Father. Sometimes we just call God Friend. And these are comfortable names for a being that still can make us incredibly uncomfortable. It's a bit like calling a shark, Smiley or Old Blue. The New Testament has given us this new lens for seeing God. We see a different side of God. And through the New Testament, we encounter a God who is clear about being concerned primarily with love. And for sure, that makes us feel good. But we still remember that getting in the water with God can kind of mess us up. I'm reminded of our point of view concerning the divine every time I attend a worship service where it seems like the most prized seats are the seats that are the farthest to the back. We're still a little wary of getting, chomped by God. We want to see some signs of God's presence, right? That's why we're there in a worship service, but we'd really like to observe them from the back of the room with a healthy amount of space between ourselves and the action up front. And this, of course, is without realizing that the action in worship is everywhere. We're willing to watch what's going on, but we're pretty wary about actually getting in there and getting involved. I don't mean to suggest that our pew position makes us any more or less likely to get messed up by God, but our posture or our position in relationship to the Almighty does make us more or less likely to have an encounter with the divine. If our posture is wary and distant, we may find it tough for God to reach us. If our posture is a little more eager or open, well, then we need to be on the lookout. The question here then is, are we accepting of being like the Hebrews who are willing to watch the show from afar, or are we willing to take the posture of Moses and jump into the quote unquote water? How bad can getting messed up by the Creator actually be? Have we not seen in the witness of the New Testament that when we get messed up by God, it's kind of a lovely mess? Given the next opportunity to jump into the water with the divine, what might our posture be? Well, I think this open posture begins in prayer. Let me introduce this little anecdote. Somewhere in the holy ether, a sleeping God is aroused by the voice of an anguished woman. God slowly settles a focus onto her words. She's making a plea on behalf of a sick child. And God thinks, I might have missed that. I'm glad that she brought that to my attention. And then God questions, what should I do about this sick child for whom she prays? God listens further, and the woman asks for healing for the child. Well, God thinks, I had been inclined to just take the child, but this woman speaks so earnestly, she swayed me. I'll intervene and bring healing to the child. Now, a story like this is a little preposterous. The assumptions that God was either 1, unaware of the sick child, or 2, unwilling to do anything about it, make God either irrelevant or uncaring. These are assumptions that don't gel with our other assumptions we make regarding a higher power. To admit that there is a higher power or a God is to admit that there is a being who knows what we live through and is involved in our everyday. So does the omnipresent God who is surrounding the child and living within the child know that the child is sick? Yes. Does the God who gives life to all and calls creation a child wish goodness for this particular sick child? Yeah, I believe also yes. Did the woman's prayer alert God to something God might have missed or sway God's mind in a particular response? Well, that's unlikely. So what's the point here? Why pray? This is the question that this anecdote brings up. Why offer up our hopes and longings to a divine being? After all, we're not really alerting God to some kind of new situation, nor are we effectually changing the mind of the divine, are we? Well, let's take the recent rash of terrorist attacks, disasters, and mass shootings. Is there a point in praying for the families and communities of those affected? Will God deliver peace and reconciliation to those grieving because people on the other side of the country or on the other side of the world asked God to do so? Well, yes and no. Yes, God will grant some sense of peace, because when I tell you that I'm praying for you in your pain and grief, I'm saying many things. Firstly, I'm saying that I acknowledge you. I recognize that you are in pain and unsettled. You're not completely alone or ignored in your pain. I see you and recognize you. I, in part, share in your pain. And secondly, I'm saying that I have good hopes for you. I want to see you well. I want to see you whole again. I'm asking for you to be well. But there's also the no side in answer to that question. Will God deliver reconciliation in response to my prayer for you? Well, not if I'm not willing to help bring about the requested reconciliation myself. I think that this is the point of headlines and Facebook statuses that say, thoughts and prayers aren't enough, especially when it comes to things like gun violence. Like they're suggesting that leaders' prayers don't matter because those particular leaders are unwilling to take the proposed steps to reduce gun violence. The prayers won't work because the people are unwilling to be a part of the solution. So if I have already decided that I will have nothing more to do with you or the solution to your situation, then yeah, I guess it's true that my prayers for you are kind of worthless. It's unlikely that our prayers alert or sway God. What our prayers do is they align us. Prayer draws us into the heart of God. Prayer involves the prayer. God's heart is love, for God is love. We see this in 1 John 4:16. When we pray for someone else, we're aligning ourselves in love. We're expressing a longing to see goodness come around somebody, and we're opening ourselves up to the possibility that we might be involved in the answer to prayer. Prayer can be a creative endeavor in that it helps us to imagine how prayer might be answered and how we might be a part of it. Prayer calls us into awareness and action. That's the uniting presence of the divine. Do I think that the families of the victims appreciate hearing that they are being prayed for? Yeah, I do. Our admission to prayer can have the same effect as a get well card from a friend. There is healing in that. There's love in that. And by extension, there's God in that. Will God fix the grief and the systems that create the grief? Well, probably not. Only if we are willing to respond and, in part, be the answer that we hope for in our prayers. Now, I can't teach you how to pray. Some might suggest that Jesus already did that when Jesus offered his disciples the Lord's Prayer, and that's probably the best model for prayer. But I won't teach you how to pray because it's such a creative and personal endeavor that the best way to figure it out is to do it. We have done some Compass episodes on prayer. It just offers different practices. We did some breath prayer way back in episode 40. Episode 61 leads you through a practice called welcoming prayer. If you want to get really disruptive, you might want to explore rage prayers. That was in episode 142 with Elizabeth Riley. Getting back to Compass, new episodes come out every other Wednesday. Again, my name is Ryan Dunn. Compass is a production of United Methodist Communications, so a big thanks to the whole team who make this possible. I'll chat at you again soon. In the meantime, enjoy your New Year's season. Let's invest into some prayer. In peace to you.